I'm just going to step through it here and talk about how you make an effective nomination. You give the nomination a title. Title is important because it's the first thing that people who are going to evaluate the nomination see. What does the title say to them? So you give a bit of thought to that. Keep it simple, 3 to 5 words. I'm looking at on the International Register, the Bayou Tapestry. Sounds a bit intriguing. In Myanmar, the inscription for the bell in Bagan. In Ireland, the Book of Kells. That sounds vaguely creepy or vaguely curious. What's what Kells? But it's a really critical Irish history book. Family of Man's photographic collection. Mapamundi is a map of the world. Comic Records, Archives of Terror. How about that? I think these titles are varying effect, but I think you think about the title, grabs attention and sends a message. Then the form asks you for a summary of your argument. So you're explaining what it is, why is it unique, is it one of a kind, is it a survival, why is it unique, what's the significance of the country or the region. So you keep it short, aim for 200 words. It's the last thing you write, not the first thing. You write the rest of your nomination first and you come to this last. And because the nomination form gives you plenty of room for detail, then your summary should not be detailed. It should be very, very punchy. Now, it asks for this kind of stuff, all this sort of formal stuff, the name of the person or organisation, relationship to the nominated material. Do they have it in their collection, or is it reside somewhere else? Does it reside in a private collection? Privately held material can be nominated. Address, telephone, email, that sort of information. There's a declaration of authority. The person must be who authorised the nomination, who allows it to go forward. Someone's taking responsibility for it. So they have to sign the form with their name, their position, their organisation, and the date. Legal information: who owns the document, who has responsibility for it, who looks after it, if you like. Copyright status. This is important for access, but it's not taken into account in deciding whether to put the nomination in the register or not. In deciding whether a document is significant, it doesn't matter who owns the copyright. But in terms of access, of course, that it affects who can get access to it. And if there are restrictions, they need to be noted. Sometimes there are cultural restrictions as well as legal ones. You have to identify what the heritage is. It needs to have if it's a single document, a feature film, the name of the film, if it's a collection, the name of the collection, whatever. And so we have an example, the Cathay Keras Malay Classics from this archive here, which Karen's going to talk about a bit later. Catalogue of registration details. Whatever you nominate has to be fixed and finite. You can't add to it. If it's a single film, it's a single film. If it's a collection, it's a closed collection. The reason is, if it's open-ended and you keep adding things to it, UNESCO completely loses control of standards and the copyright of its own logo. So the collection has to be finite. If it's a large collection, then you don't give a huge detailed catalogue. You describe it in some way that makes it possible for those who are assessing the nomination to understand what it is. Sample catalogue entries, registration numbers, whatever. You have to define it sufficiently so that we know it's closed and we know exactly what it is. And if you want to add catalogue or registration information, you can add that as an appendix to the nomination. People often do that. It's a good idea in a nomination to include some visual documentation, so include some images, makes it more alive for people who are assessing it. It could be photos, it could be some footage on a DVD or a file. So photos you can attach to JPEG files, audiovisual material. You can supply a DVD or a USB key with the content or whatever, or there's a connection on the net. You can just go to that and get and see the material. So examples of visual documentation. These are all for hard copy, but photos of these things help the nominators, the assessors, to visualise what it is. That picture on the bottom corner is of the Cook Islands document that I mentioned earlier. Then you're asked to set up the history or the provenance of the document, the life story, if you know it. If it is a print, a used print, negative, do you know how it came to be where it is now? It may be in the hands of an institution. What's its story? Who previously owned it? Because this helps to establish the authenticity of the document. You know where it came from, what its life story is. You may not know all the details, you just give as much as you know. Then a bibliography of published works. Now, if this is a film or a collection that other people have written about, have some knowledge about, have some opinions on, list them as a bibliography. This tends to reflect the influence that this material has had. It was a feature film. Are there any reviews from different countries? Any commentary? These demonstrate its influence or its impact. This PowerPoint's obviously adapted from one that we gave at Timor-Leste, but it doesn't matter what the country is. You have scholars in the country. What about outside the country? Who knows about it? Who has an opinion, has a commentary on it? Then referees. Now, we ask for usually 3 referees. There are 3 people who can authoritatively comment on your nomination. Can they support it? Can they say, explain whether it meets the criteria? And they need to be independent. They can't be, your next door neighbour or somebody who works in the same organisation or your boss or whatever. It doesn't matter. It has to be independent. And if the referees want their comments to be kept secret, they'll be kept secret. We want objective comments. Then there's the selection criteria. This is the sort of centre of the nomination. Because you have to describe why your nomination is significant, why it matters. So you comment on one or more of the primary criteria that will follow. And you choose only the ones that are relevant to your nomination. You don't have to cover them all. Many of them may be irrelevant to what you're nominating, but at least one of them will be. What's its historic significance? What does it tell about history? What is it about? Does it relate to significant events or movements, personalities, places, customs, relations with other countries, and so on? Is there a historic significance to the document? Here's an example: the 12 Sling archive in Phnom Penh, or the war crimes trials that held in New Zealand. These have a historic relationship relate to historic events. The Berlin War, obviously a historic event that everybody knew about. The pattern of the transatlantic slavery, again, part of history, a large part of history. Then, secondly, I asked about the form and style of the document. Now, with films, we have some scope here. What is its? This is a fine example of a particular style of filmmaking. Is it outstanding from artistic or cinematic viewpoint? Is it unusual? Is unusual in terms of its carrier? The Wizard of Oz is an example if seen in its original form, an example of Technicolor, which is now obsolete process in its original form, but it was shot to take advantage of the peculiarities of that particular process. Technicolor was a method that used 3 strips of film on the camera, one for each primary colour. It meant that the way scenes were arranged and the way costumes were designed exploited the characteristics of that process. You got very intense colours, very strong colours, and and when you copy a Technicolor film, when you digitise it or copy it to Eastman colour, it never looks quite the same. I can entertain you about this at lunch, but you know, it just doesn't. So to see the original Technicolor print screen is a different experience to see it in any other medium. So the Wizard of Oz used a particular carrier, which was the Technicolor print, to achieve its effect. Does it display innovative, unusual design and manufacture? Is anything innovative about the production? Is the type of documents becoming rare? Maybe it is. And is it one of a kind, the only one ever created? Form and style, photography, black and white photography. This is the F.E. Williams collection in Papua New Guinea. Photographically, it's a stunning collection, just the way the photos are composed. Here's a manuscript, stunning in a different way because of its intricate design. This is the pictogram script from the Nazi people in China. It's like a comic strip. This is their form of writing. Then the third criterion is social, spiritual, or community significance. Is there a community that has an emotional attachment to that particular, if we're talking about a film, to that particular film? How does the community show its attachment? Does it relate to a revered person? Does it centre around a political or social event of great significance? Does it relate to a saint or other spiritual leader? So, films come out of a community. What is it about that community that really matters? Here are examples. The Human Rights Documentary Heritage of Korea. In 1980, the uprising that turned Korea into a democracy, and that's still pungently remembered in Korea, and particularly in Gwangju. There's the resistance to the Trujillo regime in the Dominican Republic, one of the dictatorship archives. And then there's comparative criteria. Is the document rare, the only one ever created, or does it survive, the last one to exist? Is this a unique print? There are no other copies? Something that's not on the register, but is the Philippine film Gibuko, which survived in one 60mm print. Everything else is gone. Rarity, the Bayeux Tapestry is a unique document. A survivor, might have been in many copies, but there's only one known to survive. Then you're asked about its completeness and its condition. So with a film, is it complete? Are there parts missing? Parts have been lost? There's a book of no missing pages, but for a film, I would ask, is it all there? Films get edited and recut. Metropolis is a prime example. We'll come to that later. It was released in different versions in different countries, and it's you compare different prints and they're different. So, has anything been removed? And is there any damage to the document that diminishes its value? Impact and influence. Why is this important to the memory of the country or the region? What has been its impact on life and culture? Does it really matter? Would it matter if it disappeared? And so you summarise these in a statement of significance. You summarise the earlier points. You state the case for the authenticity of the material. You give reasons why it's important to the memory of the country or the region, and would its loss impoverish the heritage of humanity? Would it really matter if it didn't survive any longer? fundamental question to ask. Then you're asked to set out the consultation you've had with stakeholders. Now this may mean a lot of people, may mean very few. If you're nominating something that is not in your custody, then have you discussed this with the people who do have custody of it? Are there communities or family members that need to be spoken to? Are there scholars who've researched the material? And sometimes there's no obvious stakeholders, especially if it's very old and it's been long held in the institution, but sometimes there are. Then there's a risk assessment. Is it under threat? Now, a lot of things can threaten films or digital files. Climatic conditions, poor storage, lack of funds to look after it, possible political interference. Does anybody want to destroy it or get at it? So is there a preservation and access management plan? Does the institution that holds the material have a plan for how to look after it? And if so, you try to give some details of the plan. If no plan exists, then provide details of what they plan to do if you know. Sometimes there'll be no plan, and sometimes the institution will have no means of properly looking after what they have. Which means you should say so. We need to know if it's at risk. And then you add other information, statements from supporters and plans for promoting the inscribed heritage, scanned news items or other short publications relating to it. So it's a very comprehensive look at what's being nominated, asking for a lot of information, and you have to do some work to put it together. That's essential if the register is to have any credibility. It's got to be pretty thorough, and what goes on the register has to be authenticated and has to be pretty thoroughly recognised as being significant and worth preserving, and that's the purpose of it. So that's the process of creating a form. Sounds terribly onerous, doesn't it? Yeah, it involves some work. It really does. And then the people who've got to then check the form and assess it. It's a lot of work for them as well. It's the nature of the process, and it's why the registers have the prestige that they do. When something goes on a register, you can be pretty sure it's a fairly important document. Because in every round of nominations, there are those that don't make it. There are always some that don't get on the register because they don't meet the criteria, whatever the reasons happen to be. I can't give you a rejection rate, but there's always a significant number of documents that just don't get on the register for one reason or another. Sometimes the nomination form would be judged to be inadequate, there's not enough information, and people are invited to have another go. Sometimes it's judged that they just don't meet the criteria, and the usual reason for rejection is simply that they don't meet the criteria. It isn't, by putting in a nomination, it is by no means certain that you'll get on the register. You'll be judged against all these market points, and that's what will determine whether you get on or not. So, any questions? And we're going to work tomorrow on developing draft nominations, so I'm explaining all of this now. That's why it's a workshop.
If the nomination is rejected because it doesn't meet the criteria, if a nomination is rejected because it doesn't meet the criteria, is it possible for it to be resubmitted because the committee may change?
Good question. Well, I gave you the Wizard of Oz example, but look, all right, no two committees are the same. And what sometimes happens, I'll give you an example, Australian nomination. There's a piece of paper, manuscript, whatever, that is the charter of the original Australian Labor Party, back in the 1880s, I think. The first political parties will rise out of workers' movements, out of labour movements. It was in Australia as it happens, and it was elected to the state government of Queensland, one of our states. So its charter is just this manuscript piece of paper when it was originally set up, and I was on the Register Subcommittee, so was another Australian, Ross and Russell, and we were both there at the same time, as it happens. That's unusual to have two people in the same country. But I was there because I was the CCAAA nominee, and Ross was there because she was appointed by UNESCO, so we just happened to be in the same country. This illustrates one thing, that if on the Register Subcommittee or the International Advisory Committee, if the nomination being discussed is from your own country, you don't vote. You can be asked to provide information, but you do not participate in the decision. Right? There's that'd be a conflict of interest. So in this case, this document, which we both thought was important, obviously, the rest of the committee didn't think it was important at all. I thought, wow, some Australian document from some small party somewhere, I mean, what the heck? And it wasn't even European, so we accepted that. We were asked for information about it. We thought it was important because it was the first Labor Party or socialist government in the world, okay, albeit in just one Australian state. Now that's been obviously followed over the years by Labor governments in many countries and so on. But anyway, the rest of the Register Subcommittee didn't think it was all that great. So we accepted that. We then had the International Advisory Committee meeting that followed that particular round. And we were both stunned when somebody from Poland spoke up and said, "This is important." And then started to say why, and then other people sort of chimed in because they had gone through all the papers, they had looked at this, it struck them as being meeting the criteria, as being significant, as the first of its kind, etc., etc. So it was put on the register. Now, so sometimes you have a difference of opinion between those two committees. They're both experts, they're both trying to be as objective as possible, and they come up with different answers. So yes, it sometimes depends to a degree on the committee, and you might be right. You resubmit it, and the committee has changed its colour. Maybe, okay. But remember, you've got to go through two committees. You've got the Register Subcommittee and the committee on top of that. Yeah. So, but just given that, I'd say that the committees try to be as objective as possible. So that would be somewhat unusual outcome, perhaps, but it can happen. Yeah, Lisa.
A very short question. Is the status permanent or can it be challenged? Like suppose somebody somewhere found another Workers' Party document that is actually older than this one.
Well, yes, it can.
Right.
There's provision in the guidelines for things to be removed from the register. I'll give you an example of that this afternoon, but so if the original argument is found to be faulty, to be untrue, then it would have to be reconsidered. And nominations have been challenged, yes, it has happened. I think from Thailand there's a stone stele, which I can't remember the specific name. Anyway, it's on the King Rubber, yeah, that's right. It's on the register, right? Went on the register, and then we had a protest from a Thai academic.
Really?
Yes, and who said this was not what it appeared to be. Right? So we had this whole thing we had to sort of check out. We had to take objections seriously, but check it out.
How do you check that out?
I forget how we did this one, but we had to.
So the one at the National Library,
It's the National Museum.
National Museum.
Yeah,
So it's fake.
It's not
They
fake.
have done a
Yeah, I know. I've seen it. Yeah, no, it's not fake. It's real. But anyway, this particular academic, and I can't remember the actual argument he put up, but he said it is not what it claims to be. Right? Okay. So we had to take that seriously, and we researched. We went back through the nomination. We researched the arguments that were put up. I suspect we probably spoke to a few people and tried to work out whether the argument, whether he was, you know. Anyway, we came to the conclusion that it was real. It was what it claimed to be, and that was our response. And it was getting space in the Thai press, this challenge. And I guess my conclusion from that was this particular academic wanted to get some public attention to himself. This happens too. That's my interpretation. Anyway, we had to go through the process of checking whether the claim was true or not. And part of this also is when nomination comes in, and where we are concerned about the provenance of it, is people have nominated fakes. You expect that, and occasionally it happens. People nominate something that's not what it certainly is not what it seems to be, and you have to check that out. So you do have to do some work on that. Sometimes people have motives sometimes for nominating something. The motive's not always altruistic. Okay. Sometimes they might want to nominate something and get onto a register because they think its value will increase and they happen to hold it, you know, and it'll be worth a lot more, or whatever. They have a reason for it. You have to try to figure this out when dealing with the nominations, and the better known the registers become, the more this is likely to be the case. So you have to, you know, be vigilant about it. So things can be removed from the register. There's provision for that if it turns out to not be what it was supposed to be. This happened once, and I will mention that this afternoon. It will be unusual, but other reasons for removing it from the register is, and what will happen in the future, is there will be a regular monitoring of the condition of everything on the international register. This is planned to be probably a 5-yearly cycle, where the custodians of each document will be asked to report on whether the document is still in good condition, etc., etc. And that may involve, in some cases, inspections by people who are sent over to look at the condition of a document. And if the document has deteriorated, it may come off the register. If it's deteriorated and become completely unusable, it would come off the register. And that hasn't happened yet, but potentially it could happen. There hasn't been any monitoring process so far, but the international register is of such a size now where that's now necessary, and it probably means that time will be applied to other registers as well. So you have to be checking out that what has been described is still in good shape. And I guess that's an encouragement to institutions to look after what they have. And it also protects the quality, if you like, the quality of the brand, the prestige of the register. But it has to be a reason like that. It can't just because because they change their mind about something. It has to be, once something's met the criteria, it has met the criteria. That doesn't change, but some other circumstance has to intervene. Either it turns out to be not what it claimed to be, or it's deteriorated.
And it remains in the list unless, in the registry, unless delisted.
Unless delisted, yes. So
it's kind of forever.
So if you like, it's forever.
Oh.
But unless something specific of this kind intervenes.
Delisted.
Yeah. But I'll come to that this afternoon. Any other questions?
Is it possible to nominate something that is not visibly publicly known as a collection yet, but something that due to this nomination will become one? What I'm trying to say is something that we talked about on the way here. For example, the what you may call the Japanese imperial documentaries of World War II. It's it's not really there. I'm not just talking about the documentaries in Japan per se, but those that have been made in the colonies. It's not yet there, but we know that in Indonesia, in Singapore, in Hong Kong, in the Philippines, in Shanghai, there are documents that are scattered, but only visible and publicly known, not yet seen as a kind of a collection, but if one were to create an argument, a nomination, that there is one, it is finite, it is of the same theme, it has everything going for it, and so is that a possible nomination?
Yes, it is. Remember that when you nominate something, it has to be defined. Okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how many countries you have. The classic example is the current nomination for the Comfort Women. Do you know about this? The Comfort Women of World War II.
Yeah.
Now that's still in process, but that's nomination from I think 8 countries, including the Philippines, Korea, China, Philippines, Taiwan, Indonesia, Netherlands. Anyway, now that's a very complex nomination from 15 institutions, and so it's a very scattered collection, but it is a defined collection. Right? So that's an example. So it really doesn't matter as long as a collection is a coherent group of material, something that clearly belongs together. So what you've suggested is a defined theme. It can be expressed by identifying groups of material, and that's okay. Look, other examples are the archives of indentured labour in the Pacific. In the Pacific, you remember when slavery ended? Okay, they just reinvented that as indentured labour, which meant that instead of
they just put them somewhere else.
you just change the brand.
Yeah.
Okay. So that instead of sort of picking people up and shifting them across to another country, they hired people on contracts. And so you had all these Indian labourers that came to Fiji under contract. They couldn't ever go home again. I mean, they had it wasn't much of a contract. But all across the Pacific, this phenomenon happened. People were shifted from one island to another, including to Australia, where there were indentured labour in Australia. And they were on these sort of contracts that basically bound them to it. That was a form of slavery, I think, but not called as such. Now, the records of all this are in archives in several countries. So these were gathered together. I think the nomination was promoted by Fiji. They went to the other countries and they found where the records were in the various Pacific countries and Australia, and if you like, collected them theoretically, presented these as a nomination. I forget how many countries there were, but anyway, it's indentured labourers of the Pacific, and this was a large number of people, particularly in Fiji, where these records are in the National Archives of Fiji, and so people go to them for family reasons. This is their family tree, basically, in these records. And now, these movements led to other social issues and so on because of the cultural differences, etc. It was all about economics, cutting sugarcane and stuff like that. But the records are there and scattered among countries, so there's a kind of collective nomination. And such nominations can be added to over time if other countries come up with similar records. There's a process for that. So yes, it's not I guess all that in common. And there's a similar nomination related to the Panama Canal. The different nationalities were brought in on similar terms to dig the canal and die there, and that was another experience. This seems to be a pattern around the world. So so they can be gathered as a nomination. So so your idea is perfectly feasible. If you can identify what the material are, and you probably have to bring together the parties who are the custodians of the material and have them to agree to the scheme.